Hi, Pecha Kucha. I'm covering the topic of youth who have experienced abuse, neglect, and/or other trauma. This has always been of interest to me because it is important to understand the effects that trauma can have on the future trajectory of children's lives. It is also incredible to understand the physiological changes that can occur because of life experiences. Most commonly, youth who have experienced abuse, neglect, and/or trauma have experienced what is referred to as an ACE. ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which originated from a study conducted in 1995. To detect ACEs, in this study, they asked 10 questions to participants. The 10 questions that they asked were, as a child, did you experience physical abuse? As a child, did you experience emotional abuse? As a child, did you experience sexual abuse? As a child, did you experience physical neglect? Or as a child, did you experience emotional neglect? The next 5 questions were if as children they lived with somebody who was mentally ill, if they witnessed their mother being treated violently when they were children, if they lost a parent due to separation or divorce as a child, if a member of their household was in prison when they were children, and if they lived with somebody as children who abused drugs or alcohol. ACEs can happen to anyone regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. However, Black, non-Hispanic individuals have the highest proportion of children who have experienced adverse experiences. Second to non-Hispanic Black individuals in ACEs is Hispanic children. The CDC estimates that about 3 in 5, or 61% of adults, have had at least one ACE as a child. At this point, we ask ourselves, why do ACEs matter? What does it matter if it's more common to have an ACE than it is to not? It's because ACEs affect physical health, behavioral health, and mental health. Typically, the more ACEs an individual has, the more negative effects that they see on their health. The effects ACEs can have on physical health include a higher risk of heart disease, of cancers, of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and of hepatitis. Not only are individuals at higher risk for these diseases, but they also have altered physiological systems and stress responses. Individuals who have a higher number of ACEs typically have altered behavioral health that can result in things such as alcoholism, smoking, drug problems, multiple sexual partners, which can result in STDs, and interpersonal violence. This typically can continue the tradition of giving children ACEs if they do have children in their home. Mental health is also dramatically affected by ACEs. Individuals are substantially more likely to have depression and commit suicide. It was found that individuals with an ACE score of 6 are 4.5 times more likely to be depressed and 12 times more likely to commit suicide. Because ACEs can have such a drastic effect on all types of health, screening for ACEs in healthcare settings can be incredibly helpful to predict medical complications or issues an individual could experience. This type of screening has slowly become more prevalent as the effects of ACEs have been studied. The effects that ACEs can have can be understood through the case study of an individual named Miss J. Miss J showed up at the hospital in active respiratory distress. She was already well known in this hospital because she had been a regular to the ER due to various chronic diseases. In addition to this, she had a history of depression and had attempted suicide multiple times. She expressed to her nurse that she had watched her mom die in the same way that she almost did, smoking and drinking. Not only did she smoke and drink, but she was in the works of overcoming addictions to opiates and alcohol. Because of these tendencies, she consistently landed herself in the hospital fighting for her life. She told more to her nurse about her mother, describing the various times that she saw her father beat her mother on Fridays and Saturday nights before her mother had kicked her father out. Not only did she witness her mother's beatings, but she also personally endured the effects of neglect, poverty, abuse, sexual molestation, and parental alcoholism. An important concept to understand about Mrs. J's story is that ACEs have a cyclical nature. Miss J told her nurse how she hated that she was dying in the same way her mother did. By recognizing the ACEs that we or other people have in their lives, we can prevent ourselves and others from afflicting our children with the same traumas we ourselves had to face. ACEs and trauma faced by youth can dramatically affect the way development occurs. Pictured here is a circumstance where the individual must choose to fight their present situation or run away. Fight or flight is how our sympathetic nervous system responds to stressful situations. When we as humans encounter situations where our fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system is activated, Our body goes through a process in secreting a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that is extremely helpful in helping to keep ourselves safe in situations where we need a response quicker than we can internalize the situation we're in. Cortisol enables us to respond quickly and adequately to the circumstance. Our pupils will dilate so we can see clearer, and our heart will start beating faster so our muscles receive proper oxygenation. Unfortunately, prolonged exposure to high levels of cortisol can be toxic. Our bodies aren't built to be consistently fighting or flighting. When a child is consistently abused, they are experiencing high levels of cortisol because of their lack of safety, and therefore they put their energy into surviving rather than to developing. This exposure changes the physiological makeup of an individual. Their bodies are not properly able to go through normal processes because of the trouble they experience in simply surviving. An area that is now being studied to understand these effects is called epigenetics. Epigenetics can refer to various aspects of our genetics, but a typical area is related to histones and methyl groups. If a chemical balance is not reached within the DNA, proper methylation cannot be completed and DNA cannot be accessed and properly transcribed, which leads to an individual who is not able to undergo proper development of necessary parts of the body, or typically we do see issues in mental health with this. All of these ailments can be prevented by us taking a minute to reflect and recognize our ACEs and how they affect our decisions or health. I think it's also important to recognize that ACEs are events that are inflicted upon us by others' choices. We always need to be aware of the effects our decisions are having on others.